Hi, welcome to Jesus on the Fly.
Hey, great to see you again, or great for you to see us.
Yeah, we're just going to call these quarantine editions. So this is where we talk about the words and actions of Jesus in the Gospels, so we can learn from him and integrate that into our daily lives. All right. It is Holy Week. Happy Holy Week. Happy Holy Week. We always keep scripture that we read in the context of Jesus' death and resurrection for us.
Yes.
We'll do that just as we always do and celebrate that.
It's weird because today I'm recording for Easter and I already recorded for Good Friday on Monday. So really strange Holy Week for pastors now, but hey.
And for people. I think Holy Week is good. Weird for everyone right now, right? Raise your hand in the comments if Holy Week is weird for you right now.
Yes, it's weird. Or if you're skipping it altogether and saving it for later, that's okay too.
I mean, there's nothing that says we have to do it this moment, right?
Right. Yeah, right.
So
Jesus didn't say, make sure you worship Easter,
the dates on the calendar.
He didn't say so, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit in the reading today. I think that Jesus has a whole lot of freedom for us, if you will, in the way that we celebrate even our traditions. And so here we go. Dave, we're going to do Matthew 9, right? And we're going to do verses 14 through 17. Verses 14 through 17.
Yes, here we go. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast, and then they will fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved.
Oh, okay, awesome. So Jesus has a lot of metaphors here, right? So Jesus tends to talk in parables anyway, and these are like little tiny mini parables, which I didn't ever realize before. So let's maybe take one of the parables at a time. I think this is more than about fasting for Jesus, and I think that's one reason he starts to talk in parables, because he's trying to like broaden what they're talking about, if you will. Like they ask a question about fasting, and Jesus is like, well, let's talk about where we're at with
let's expand on this
the ways we express our faith. Yeah, exactly. So number one, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. Oh my goodness. Tell us more, Dave. What is Jesus talking about? Like, they're talking about fasting, and Jesus is talking about weddings. What's up?
Right. Well, I think that the main idea is that Jesus is present there with them. You know, that's I can see how that's a pretty easy, interpretation. Okay, that makes sense. Jesus is there with them, so there's no reason for them to kind of fast and mourn.
So we're not waiting in the same way. He's trying to tell them maybe they're not waiting in the way they were before, waiting for the Son of God to come. Hello, I'm here. We can celebrate that right now.
Right.
So then what about us, where we're back to waiting? You know what I mean? We're back to waiting
to return again. So now we can fast. Apparently,
it seems like we have the freedom to fast. Unlike maybe before, there was less freedom in it, I guess, in the kind of pharisaical way of understanding it.
Well, also, this is maybe not exactly the way you should look at it, but Jesus died, right? And so as they were approaching that moment, that was the time to fast. That was the time to mourn, right? Because Jesus was going to die. And certainly after he died, Jesus died, then they would be mourning for that snippet of time. This is very Holy Week oriented. And then Jesus is risen, and then he's back. He doesn't you don't need to mourn again. Right. Definitely while he's the resurrected Lord. Don't need to mourn.
Yeah.
And then at least the way I look at it too is that we have less reason to fast right now. We have less reason to mourn right now because Jesus is risen.
We live in both. Like we
Yeah.
are waiting, but it's all been fulfilled. So we're still, like we still have the aspect of the wedding feast. Like we even take communion and stuff, and that's like
Yeah.
the aspect of the wedding feast. So
Yeah.
that's helpful. That's
Right.
good.
But I think the more interesting illustrations are the two after that. You know,
Okay. Do you want me
the
to
patch of the cloth. Sure.
Yes. Verse 16 says, "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment and a worse tear is made." I have actually experienced this actual thing where, yeah, because I don't sew. Like, I don't know how to sew. And so, like, if you take a piece of fabric and you try to put it on, like, Zeke or Jonah's pants, because, like, boys wear out their pants for some reason. I don't know, that's a weird
Yeah,
phenomenon.
right.
But you put it over it and you haven't, like, washed that fabric first, it will, like, you'll sew it and then it shrinks up and then, like, all the thread is like, I can't quite hold on. And it's, you know, it's shrinking. And so it tears when you put it on there. So that's like a real thing. I think people who
yeah,
sew
that's
can
legit.
relate
Now,
to.
I don't have wineskins at home, so
That's true.
don't know how that works exactly, but I mean,
Same idea,
I'm
though,
sure
I think.
Jesus is correct in his like
If you pour your
explanation.
wine into
Yeah.
old wineskins, they'll explode.
There's got to be a truth to that somehow.
It kind of reminds me of when you leave pop in the garage in the winter and then they explode, like they freeze.
Yes.
And then it can't hold the pressure. So I wonder if that's
Yeah.
similar to the wineskins.
Yeah,
like
it could
there's too
definitely
much pressure and they explode.
Kind of be a similar illustration.
So anyway, if that happens to your Mountain Dew, you know what Jesus is talking about. So
So the real question is then, what is the deal in terms of the extension of Jesus' idea here with these two illustrations? There's something about the old and the new that I think is
Those are keywords.
playing into that, and interesting that like I feel in my interpretation that there is something that changes after Jesus has been crucified and risen. Like that we are in this kind of like, I don't know if I should say kind of, I think the real 1,000 year reign of Jesus, not literally 1,000 years, but like Jesus reigns on earth
the
now.
end times, as it were, like the time after there was a
Right.
before, then there's an
Essentially
after
just-
Jesus.
Essentially just the time since he rose from the dead until the time when he returns.
Well, the
Not
temple curtain is
anything
like torn in
literal.
two, like at Jesus' death or at his resurrection. It's at his death, right? The temple curtain is torn in two. We have full access to God, and that's one thing. Like he's saying, like you don't need to do the old way because I'm bringing a new way. And I think you're absolutely right. Jesus' death and
Right.
resurrection brings faith and our expression of faith to us in a totally new way. Like we don't have to do the old stuff. We can. I mean, we can participate in like a Passover feast. We were even talking about like maybe doing that at our house. We're not because it's too complicated and I have to buy groceries.
Right.
But yeah, like we don't have to
Yeah.
do that old stuff.
Well, and you know, I think there's probably some really good interpretations of this or explanations of this, like in commentaries and stuff. Like, I'm sure there's some really good like parallels that they make with kind of our lives now and how that all works. But I do feel as though there's something not going to work with the old system. I really think that it is like overlaying Jesus's ideals onto old ways will not pan out, you know.
Yeah.
And I
that makes
think,
sense.
you know, Jesus says that he didn't come to abolish the law. So he's not saying like out with the old and in with the new.
Yeah. No
It's
more 10 Commandments. Do whatever you want.
as like literal as that can be.
Yeah.
But there is,
He's
but
showing
at
how
the
it
same
doesn't
time,
work when you try to fit.
right. But at the same time, there's something happening with the new that is pushing the old away. And maybe it's just in terms of like, you know, as we look at it in terms of the ceremonial law or the Sabbath rules.
Which the fasting
and
would
such.
be like that wasn't part of the 10 Commandments and the law
Yes.
that, you know,
Right.
shows us our sin, if you will. Instead, it's like rites that we do to connect with God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, so if we continue to do that, if we continue to have those rights, and if we continue to worship in such a way that they did in the Old Testament before Christ came and before he had risen, I think that is going to be problematic for us.
Yeah, it's interesting
For
because,
example, if you just did, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
no,
I just want to say this one thing. If you did sacrifices, in the temple,
Oh, yeah.
like clearly that's problematic and it's broken, and you just
Yeah, not
can't
good.
put Jesus over top
Yeah.
of that, like in that sense.
it's so true. I think mostly because we could do those things. Like when I fast and people fast, Christians fast, and we're not saying don't do those practices. The problem is, I think, a lot of times when we participate in them, we end up looking for some fulfillment from those things, when the fulfillment can only come from Christ himself. And so, like you said, when you try to overlay it, like when you try to like make it a thing instead of, I just think it robs you from like Christ alone, grace alone, and all of that's intended to be now with Christ's death and resurrection.
Right, yeah.
So, well, just real fast, we're running out of time,
I know.
and we could go on. This is one of Dave's favorite subjects. One thing I was going to say is in quarantine, like in our current context, I think that's interesting because I think we're all being pushed to change in some ways. Like we have to change the way we do things, right? The old way that we might even bring back, whatever. This is very imperfect thoughts. But like the old way we did things, they are not going to work right now. It's too hard to fit it into the new thing that we have, that is staying at home and quarantine and all of that stuff. And so I think that I wonder about the places in our life where God uses that to unveil to us this sense of the need for new, I guess. Like I think we would be people who would always be like, I'm good without the change and the transition required for that. And God sometimes pushes the envelope, I think, in our lives and uses the things, and I'm not saying God created coronavirus. He's not, he doesn't create evil and disease, but he uses those things, I think, to push us into this place where we're like, okay, I have to do something new. I have to engage with the new.
I really think there's a lesson in not being able to go to the church building. I really feel like there's a lesson there that we don't have to go there for God's presence. And I think that's what Jesus is here. He's saying, I'm here. Like you don't need to go somewhere to get me. Like I'm here. And I think that's a great lesson. And I'm not saying we shouldn't go to the church building and worship, because that is a place where we can all go as the family of God.
It's like a gift.
But I think we are learning a lesson there that like God isn't found in the church building. Like if I videotaped my sermon not in the sanctuary, it would be the same.
Because it's God's word that does the power.
Yeah, I just feel like, of course there is a sense of like the presence of God being there, like in the building. But I think that's something that we could call not necessary, honestly.
Good.
I mean, when you get right
but
down
not
to
necessary.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right, so on that note, open your Bible. Check it out. Find out what God has to say in it, because that's, where we know he's found. And when we talk to other Christians about it, when we talk to our family, within our families about it, about who Jesus is, then that's the church too. It's like the church at work. So, all right,
Yep.
Pastor Dave, that is all we have time for today.
It is.
Thanks for all that insight, and we will see you next week.
All right, see ya. Have a great week.